Minister Paul Keating about the future of compulsory super. But first tonight, the landmark $3 million compensation payout awarded against former asbestos manufacturer James Hardie after a handyman developed a rare form of cancer. Matthew Werfel's win in the South Australian Employment Tribunal is significant because he was exposed to the deadly substance while renovating houses. His lawyer says it's a record payout and that the judgment will set an important precedent for other asbestos victims. Angelique Donnellan reports.
So it's been 2 years of pain and stress for me and my wife, my children, having to tell 3 young girls that their dad has cancer. It's been very difficult.
Matthew Werfel cherishes the time he spends with his wife and 3 young daughters. He doesn't know how much longer he has left with them.
I just can't imagine not being around for my family. It makes me feel sick. It makes me feel sick to my stomach that a substance like this was ever created in the first place.
Matthew is 42 and has mesothelioma, a cancer caused by asbestos. But in his case, there's no wheezing or shortness of breath because his tumour isn't in the lungs. It's an extremely rare form of mesothelioma in the testicles.
I was diagnosed in August of 2017. I'd felt a lump on the inside of my right leg.
The asbestos fibres are able to migrate from the lungs, where they are inhaled, into that area to cause mesothelioma.
I pretty much know that that's a death sentence.
Bye-bye. Try and be brave, I guess. He's my world, my rock. Just try not to think about it and just try and tackle each day as it comes.
Matthew's what's known as a third wave victim.
So the first wave being people who mined and milled asbestos products or worked in asbestos factories. The second wave usually refers to tradesmen. The third wave then is Matthew's case. So those who come into contact with the product as a result of it already being present in the home and performing home renovations.
A judge has found Matthew was repeatedly exposed to asbestos between the mid-90s and the early 2000s. He had no idea when he was pulling down fences or renovating this home that he'd been exposed to the deadly substance.
I was painting the exterior of our house, in particular the eaves of the house, in which it was an older home and it required sanding and painting. And so it created a lot of dust. It was all over me, in my hair, on my clothes.
Like many other asbestos victims, Matthew sued James Hardie for his illness. At the centre of his case is whether the company should have done more to publicly alert potential home renovators to the dangers of the material it manufactured.
Our argument against James Hardie is that they owed people like Matthew a duty of care, and in exercising that duty of care, they ought to have run a public awareness campaign.
But now we know every one of us could be devastated by it.
We likened the sort of campaign that James Hardie should have run to other public awareness campaigns like the Grim Reaper AIDS campaign, as well as the Slip Slop Slap skin cancer campaign.
By the time Matthew was exposed, asbestos was known to be deadly, and James Hardie had stopped making products containing the material. But the problem is, once in a home, asbestos is difficult to identify.
The difference between what you would consider to be gyprock or asbestos sheeting, you don't know. You need it to be tested. Home renovators, beware, because you just don't know where it is.
This company produced products from 1930 that killed people.
In the early 2000s, Bernie Banton was a key figure in negotiating how the James Hardie financed Asbestos Injuries Compensation Fund would work. Today, Home Renovator claims to the fund are at record levels.
The last financial year, there were 700 identifiable claims for mesothelioma in Australia. Of those, 374 were claimed against James Hardie, and 229 of those claims were for renovators.
No one knows just how many Home Renovator claims there'll be in the future.
If you look at the statistics from James Hardie and their actuarial report, you would have to think that that may increase. I mean, it's a bit of crystal ball gazing, but there's a lot of fibro houses out there and there's a lot of fibro in the environment.
Matthew's legal battle has taken 2 years. Today he went to court to hear the judgment.
But I worry about my family. Oh, we got everything? Yeah. I worry about not being able to raise my children and guide them.
In its defence, James Hardie said Matthew had been a smoker. It also argued there was insufficient evidence to link asbestos exposure to Matthew's rare form of mesothelioma. But the South Australian Employment Tribunal disagreed, finding the company failed to take reasonable steps to minimise Matthew's risk.
Well, look, it's been a good win. However, it's built on the thousands of people that have contracted cancer as a result of asbestos.
Because of his relative youth and expected lost future income, Matthew was awarded a record payout of more than $3 million. His lawyer expects James Hardie to appeal.
The potential future liability for James Hardie is extraordinary. It will establish a principle that James Hardie ought to be held liable in circumstances where persons have come into contact with their product years after they've been installed.
How I feel about James Hardie is that it's time that they just take responsibility for what they've done. Not only to me, to all of those people before me and the ones to come into the future.
Last night, we reported on the pressure from the government backbench to stop already legislated increases in superannuation from 9.5% to 12%, despite the Prime Minister and Treasurer insisting the rises will go ahead. The battle over super, including letting low-wage earners opt out of the system altogether, will take place in a foreshadowed review of the retirement income system later this year. For some,